Hello and a very good morning. You're back with us here on the Breakfast News on DD India. I am Nancy Kohli and with me is my colleague Rukma, and over the next 1 hour we'll get you all the news from across the nation, world, sports and business updates. And in fact, before we begin, we'll also in fact be getting you a look at the top stories. Good morning Rukma, how are you doing this morning?
I'm fine, thank you Nancy, and a very good morning to you and to all our viewers as well. It's a beautiful Thursday morning, and as Nancy just said, we have for you a whole 1 hour packed with all the latest news updates from India and across the world. Drama in the US Capitol as lawmakers return to continue counting of the Electoral College after riots, Electoral College votes after riots break out. President-elect Joe Biden reacts to all that happened there in the past few hours. Back home, Prime Minister Modi to inaugurate a new freight corridor, all the COVID updates from India and across the world, and much, much more. But first, here are the headlines.
Pro-Trump supporters stormed the US Capitol. Congress reconvened session to certify Biden victory after being suspended temporarily. President-elect Joe Biden calls the turn of events an insurrection. Twitter logs Trump account for 12 hours. Facebook feature blocks Trump paid for 24 hours.
Democrats set to control the US Senate as party candidates Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock win the Georgia polls. Results splits the Senate 50-50, with Vice President-elect Kamala Harris deciding the tiebreaker.
Prime Minister Modi to dedicate the Rewari Madar section of the Western dedicated freight corridor to the nation today. The Prime Minister will also flag off the world's first double-stack long-haul 1.5-kilometer long container train hauled by the electric traction.
Another dry run for COVID-19 vaccination to take place tomorrow. Union Health Minister Dr. Harshvardhan to hold a meet with states today. Recovery rate in the country at 96.36%. Only 1 death per million population recorded in the last few days.
Government steps are visual after bird flu reported from 5 states. The Health Ministry sets up a multidisciplinary team. Officials dispatched to Kerala. Environment Ministry issues advisory for states on preventive and control measures.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds video teleconference with his German counterpart Angela Merkel, discusses about response to the COVID-19 pandemic, assures the German leader of India's commitment to deploy its capacities for the benefit of the world.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Shankar calls on Sri Lanka President Gotabaya Rajapakse, reiterates commitment to India's neighbourhood-first policy in talks with Sri Lankan counterpart, reassures Colombo of supplying COVID-19 vaccines.
And in cricket, Australia win toss, elect to bat first in third test being played in Sydney. Reigns stop play after David Warner departs early.
And first up, let's get you all the news that's been the developments taking place there at the US Capitol, where the US lawmakers returned to the Capitol to continue the counting of electoral college votes at around 6:30 this morning India time. That was hours after a mob of rioters overran the building and sent members of the Congress fleeing. The situation was brought under control by the National Guard troops who dispersed the crowds. Earlier, chaos erupted inside the Capitol building as thousands of pro-Trump demonstrators charged the complex and eventually made their way onto the Senate floor, plunging Washington into crisis and halting the congressional count of the Electoral College votes to confirm President-elect Joe Biden's victory. The president fomented thousands of supporters in a speech by the White House before they marched to the Capitol, vowing to never concede the election. The video was, however, later taken down from the social media.
As the House reconvened following a storming of the U.S. Capitol, Vice President Mike Pence read the statement on the Senate floor. He termed the incident as a dark day in the history of the United States Capitol.
To those who wreaked havoc in our Capitol today, you did not win. Violence never wins. Freedom wins. And this is still the people's house. And as we reconvene in this chamber, the world will again witness the resilience and strength of our democracy.
Now, President-elect of the U.S., Joe Biden, has termed the activity of the protesters borders on sedition. The former vice president called the demonstrators at the Capitol invasion of the Congress and threatening the safety of duly elected officials as not a protest but insurrection. He also called on the mob to pull back and allow the work of democracy to go forward. He also urged Trump to go on national television to demand an end to this siege.
It's not protest, it's insurrection. The world's watching. Like so many other Americans, I am genuinely shocked and saddened that our nation, so long the beacon of light and hope for democracy, has come to such a dark moment. Through war and strife, America's endured much. And we will endure here, and we will prevail again, and will prevail now. The work of the moment and the work of the next 4 years must be the restoration of democracy, of decency, honor, respect, the rule of law, just plain, simple decency.
And earlier, with regard to the ongoing situation in Washington, D.C., Twitter today removed 3 tweets from the account of President Donald Trump, locking his account for 12 hours following the removal of his tweets that contained repeated and severe violations of its civic integrity policy. Twitter mentioned this at 5:32 a.m. The company also warned that further violations of its rules will result in permanent suspension of the president's Twitter account. Twitter also mentioned that the situation will be continuously evaluated in real time, including examining activity on the ground and statements made of Twitter. It will keep the public informed, including if a further escalation in enforcement approach is necessary. Facebook also blocked Trump from posting for 24 hours over policy violations. YouTube removed the controversial video from the president's accounts. The video showed Trump repeating unfounded claims that the election was taken from him and encouraging his supporters to disperse after violence erupted at the Capitol.
Meanwhile, at least 13 individuals have been arrested during the riots at the Capitol Hill. Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police said 5 guns, including handguns and long guns, have also been seized. He also said some officers are being treated for injuries. One woman was shot inside the complex and later succumbed to her injuries. The citywide curfew began at 11:30 at night last night till 11:30 in the morning today.
And Democratic challengers Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock have defeated Georgia's 2 incumbent Republican U.S. senators in the state's runoff elections in a development that gives their party effective control of the Senate. Republicans controlled 50 seats in the Senate following November elections and would have remained the majority party in the 100-seat chamber with just 1 win in Georgia. But instead, Democrats picked up 2 seats and now are set to run the Senate as a Democratic Vice President, Kamala Harris, will cast tie-breaking votes. And joining us now is our correspondent Abhishek Jha for more on this story. Well, good news for Joe Biden and his team there. The Georgia election results coming as a major boost.
Of course, but this news, at least Biden and Harris team can rest a little and they can have some sigh of relief, because this is going to give them that much needed balance of power. And Joe Biden, the presidency, will be now more secure in terms of taking a strong and bold decisions when it comes to economic or strategic affairs. Until now, the balance of power was very much in favor of Republicans with 48 seats, and this Democrats had only 46 seats. With this 2 seats, which now the power balance is 50-50 in both for both the parties, and the winning vote can come from the chair of the House. That will be Kamala Harris. So with this power equation now, this Republican parties, these Democrats seem to be very much in control of the U.S. policy, and President Biden can be taking decisions and can secure a very powerful presidential terms in the days to come.
All right, Abhishek, also talking about the developments that took place at the Capitol early this morning India time, and a word on the Congress's certification of the President-elect Joe Biden. Well, has that resumed now after that disruption caused due to violence there?
Okay, so we are hearing reports, Nancy, that this whole process is resuming now because after the authorities and the police took control of the situation, there has been a lot of cleaning up because of the all-around mess that these protesters had created by doing smashing windows, breaking furniture, and disrupting all the assembly seats, and so the authorities had to take control of the situation first, and then when this whole situation seemed to be very much controlled and the protesters were thrown outside, then now we are hearing that the whole hearing process is
Abhishek, we'll be coming back to you, but there's this tweet of the Prime Minister that we're getting. It's there on your screens for our viewers, and Prime Minister Modi has written, "Distressed to see news about rioting and violence in Washington, D.C. Orderly and peaceful transfer of power must continue. The democratic process cannot be allowed to be subverted through unlawful protests." So Prime Minister Modi tweeting there about the high drama. The rioters had stormed the U.S. Capitol, and U.S. representatives reacting strongly. President-elect Joe Biden too reacting strongly, calling it an insurrection and not a protest. However, we believe from various reports that we are getting, Abhishek, that all is well now and order has been restored after police used tear gas.
Of course, Rukma, and it looks like only Donald Trump, at this moment of time, only Donald Trump thinks that the victory has been stolen from him. The world thinks otherwise. In US also, there has been widespread condemnation from both sides of the fences. Democrats and Republican senators have called this an unprecedented situation, and they have called for the restoration of peace and demonstrators to go away, law to take its own course. The power transfer, which was until now was very much speculated that there would not be a smooth power transfer, that has come to very much, those apprehensions have come very much real now. Donald Trump, while addressing their supporters in the morning, has said that the power, this victory has been stolen from him, from the supporters, and from the USA. And those instigating voices ultimately led this chaos to run and stream into the Capitol Hill, where it was an unprecedented situation, both in terms of security and democracy-wise. Meanwhile, the world leaders have also expressed their disappointment, while Canadian Prime Minister have called that this situation is very much heartening. It is sad in terms of democratic values, upholding democratic values. UK President Boris Johnson has called this situation a disgusting situation. What has occurred at Capitol Hill? Now we are also seeing our Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also said that this whole situation is not something that can be called democratic and peaceful protest. Smooth power transfer is what is necessary at this moment of time in the USA, because you have seen, the world has seen this whole election process has how fair and how unbiased this election process was, and ultimately the Joe Biden team has won this election, and now Trump needs to hand over power to the winning team.
All right, Abhishek Jha, thanks very much for joining us for the moment and sharing all those developments and insights as far as that story is concerned. And of course, worldwide condemnation, they're coming in as far as the rioters, they're storming the US Capitol this morning, India time. All right, moving on now to news from back home. Prime Minister Modi will dedicate to the nation the 306-kilometer long Rewari Madar section of the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor today at 11 this morning via video conferencing. The Prime Minister will also flag off the world's first double-stacked long-haul 1.5-kilometer long container train hauled by electric traction from New Ateli to New Kishangarh. The governors and the chief ministers of Rajasthan and Haryana, along with the Union Minister Piyush Goyal, will be present on the occasion. With the inauguration of this section, seamless connectivity between the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor and the Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor will be achieved. And let's now go across to our correspondent Arun Sharma, who is joining us with more updates on that. Arun, this is yet another dedication to the nation as far as the freight corridor is concerned, and seamless connectivity, clearly they're topping the government's agenda.
Good morning, Nancy and Rukma. Indeed, yes, one more significant day as far as the railway sector and the freight corridors in our country is concerned. You know this fact that the approvals to the dedicated freight corridors was given in 2006, but not a single kilometer could be constructed in our country because most of the projects were pending and they were in files only. But it was only after 2014 that the government started focusing upon the freight corridors and specifically the dedicated freight corridors in our country. So on 29th of December, we saw that how Prime Minister Narendra Modi, dedicating it to the nation, one of the important sections as far as the Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor is concerned. And today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to dedicate the Western, one of the important section that's between Rewari and Madar on the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor. Now, we know this fact that the entire Western Dedicated Freight Corridor is 1,500 kilometers, and one of the important sections of close to 300 kilometers now that's between Haryana and Rajasthan. We know this fact that focus of the government has been on, providing speed and seamless connectivity as well. Now, till now, the trains, as far as the freight corridors are, or the freight trains are concerned, they were running at a speed of close to 25 kilometers per hour, 30 kilometers per hour, 35 kilometers per hour. But now the trial runs have been done with a speed of 100 kilometers per hour, and the department is confident that they can achieve a speed of more than 120 kilometers per hour as far as this freight corridors, the freight trains are concerned. The beauty of this freight corridor is that they'll be having more capacities. 25 tons of double stack axle load. That's what the capacity of these corridors is. That means more logistics can be sent at one time, at same time. This will be cost efficient in nature, and this will be having seamless connectivity as well. It's an important day as far as the freight corridors and specifically the dedicated freight corridors are concerned.
Right, Arun, also the journey. A major achievement on India's part. While the world was in lockdown, while India was in lockdown, the government clearly pushing forward its agenda to provide employment to the unemployed as jobs were lost because of the corona pandemic and so on. Clearly a huge achievement as far as India is concerned.
Absolutely, Rukma. So there is an initiative by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It is about Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana. So during the COVID pandemic time, we know this fact that the migrant laborers who were returning back home, they were provided with jobs as far as the government initiatives are concerned, various initiatives. That includes Awas Yojana, that includes Sadak Yojana, that includes construction of the freight corridor as well. And it is because of that we have seen how in last 6 years, these dedicated freight corridor are much in focus. We know this fact that Prime Minister Office was constantly monitoring these dedicated freight corridors projects even during the Pragati meeting as well. So this shows that how it is of major importance and the important part of this Western Dedicated Freight Corridor is that it will be having more capacity. That means double stack or the double decker.
Sure.
The wagons can transport the logistical part from one place to another, and this will be a game changer because be it the business persons of our country, be it the farmers of our country, they'll be in a position to send their logistical part of the stuff within less time. Because till now there was no timetable as far as the freight trains are concerned. But now after this dedicated pet corridors, they'll be having a fixed timetable. A businessman who is sending his produce or his manufacturing goods will be in a position to monitor their entire transportation goods. Last but not the least, they'll know that this is a cost-efficient mode of transport. Number one, whatever goods stuff they are sending, they'll reach on time, and of course with safety and security. And last but not the least, it will be having more capacities as far as transportation of goods are concerned. So it's a win-win situation for the infrastructure of our country on one side. So on the other side, the business persons and the entrepreneurs and of course the manufacturers in our country will get a better ecosystem to send their stuff, and they'll get bigger market as well in form of various states. So it's a big boost as far as the market providing activity is concerned.
Okay. All right, Arun, thanks very much for joining us for the moment and sharing all those details. Thanks very much.
And you stay with that story throughout the day. We'll be back with you for more, and the Prime Minister will also be addressing on that occasion, and we'll be very viewers who are interested should tune in to DD India at that time. Meanwhile, in other news, the central government is gearing up for the rollout of COVID-19 vaccination across the country. 2 COVID vaccines have been given emergency use authorization by the Drugs Controller General of India recently. The rollout of COVID-19 vaccine is expected to begin in the near future. This milestone entails the need for testing of all planned mechanisms to conduct the vaccination drive in the country as a simulation of the actual execution. Another round of dry run or mock drill in all 700 plus districts and all union states and union territories will take place tomorrow to ensure efficient planning and management for vaccine delivery. All states will undertake dry run tomorrow except UP, which has already conducted dry run on the 5th of January, and Haryana, which will be conducting the dry run on the 7th of January. Each district will identify 3 types of session sites similar to the previous dry runs, including a public health facility, private health facility and rural or urban outreach sites. Nearly 1,70,000 vaccinators and 3 lakh vaccination team members have been trained in the process to be followed at the vaccination sites. In this regard, Union Minister for Health and Family Welfare Dr. Harshvardhan will be holding a meeting with the states and union territory health ministers today to guide them on the conduct of the dry run.
Now, according to the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, new COVID-19 cases per million population are the lowest in India for the last 7 days. And showing a tough fight against the pandemic, India has the lowest tally for deaths related to COVID-19 per million.
And Kerala, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh and Haryana have reported cases of bird flu. Considering the situation, the centre has asked states to keep a vigil. Let's take a look at the status of bird flu in the country.
The pandemic is yet to abate, but the spectre of a bird flu outbreak is now looming large over the country. Cases of the disease have cropped up among migratory birds and poultry in Kerala, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh and Haryana. The centre has taken the matter seriously, and the Wildlife Division of the Environment Ministry has written to Chief Secretaries of all states and union territories to take all measures to stop the spread of the disease to humans and other domestic animals or birds. A control room has been set up in Delhi to closely monitor the situation. The disease remains zoonotic and there is no proof yet of it spreading among humans due to the consumption of infected poultry and related products. Nonetheless, Union Health Ministry has deployed multidisciplinary teams to avian influenza affected Alappuzha and Kottayam districts in Kerala and Panchkula district in Haryana. The teams have been sent to assist state health departments in implementing the disease containment plan. Another high-level team comprising Director NCDC and Joint Secretary and COVID-19 Nodal Officer, Ministry of Food Processing Industries, has been deployed in Kerala. Over 2,700 migratory birds have died due to avian influenza in Himachal Pradesh. Kangra District Administration has stopped the sale of poultry and fishery products in 4 divisions of the district adjoining Pong Dam. Surveillance has been stepped up in several other states after cases of bird flu emerged in 5 states. Tamil Nadu has initiated several preventive measures at the border adjoining Kerala. Himachal adjoining state Uttarakhand has also issued an alert on Tuesday. Forest divisions of the state have been directed to maintain strict vigil against the disease. The Animal Husbandry Department in Gujarat has also been put on alert. The first outbreak of avian influenza in India took place in 2006. Not a single case of the disease spreading to humans has been detected in India so far. The virus usually spreads in India after the arrival of migratory birds from September onwards through the winter. With Thiruvananthapuram, Bhopal, Shimla, Jaipur and Lucknow bureaus, DD India.
And our correspondent Meghna now joins us with more details. Meghna, a very good morning to you. Well, bad news coming in on that front as far as case detection of bird flu cases are concerned. The centre and states are fighting hard to contain the situation. Give us a sense of where we are at now.
Definitely, Rukma, when we actually look at the current scenario, we obviously have to look at the numbers, the culling numbers also, because culling is currently being carried out in Kerala, and there are definitely rapid response teams and culling teams which are actually carrying out the culling, which is the slaughtering of the birds, and very important is the disposal of the dead birds also. So there are guidelines that have already been devised in the action plan. The action plan which was devised in 2005, the action plan clearly states the disposal of the dead birds, that has to be a burial site. It is a demarcated area which needs not to be anywhere near any water body. It needs not to be anywhere near the habitat or those places. So it is devised for that. Also slack lime, gunny bags, PPE kits and all those things are used to actually carry out the culling as well as the disposal of the dead birds. Also what important is that the samples are being collected, and there is also an SOP for the collection of samples. So samples are being properly collected and sent to Bhopal, which has the National Institute of High Security Animal Diseases. So at that place the diagnosis is currently going on, the sample checkings and all those things are going on. Also we know that Madhya Pradesh had, the CM had chaired a high level meeting for that matter. Also Kerala has declared a state specific disaster. So all these things are going on. We also need to know that this avian influenza, we call it, is basically comes from migratory birds that come to the country between September to March. So they basically bring this avian influenza, and after that now actually we are trying as much as possible to do the surveillance part. So surveillance basically is clinical surveillance, virological surveillance, serological surveillance. Also disinfection at many poultry farms is being carried out. Biosecurity of poultry is being done. Also there is a ban on movement of poultry amidst many states. Also the adjoining states, neighboring states bordering states have been put on alert so that the disease does not spread. Also the chief wildlife wardens of many states have also been asked to keep a vigil, and guidelines have also been issued to them. So they have to keep a vigil on any abnormal mortality that takes place amidst birds and all these avians. So basically all these things are being chalked out, and we already have an action plan which was devised in 2005 and which has been revised time and again, so that we actually know how to contain it, how to be prepared for it, and actually how to stop this disease from spreading, so that it does not spread to other places except the epicenters or the nearby areas.
Absolutely. 12 epicenters, also in fact known as the risk zones, have been identified, and effective containment and active surveillance there being carried out, which is absolutely critical. Thanks, Meghna, very much for joining us and sharing all those inputs as far as this avian influenza is concerned. Now, moving on, Prime Minister Modi held a video teleconference with his German counterpart, Chancellor Angela Merkel. The Prime Minister appreciated the long-standing role of Chancellor Merkel in providing stable and strong leadership at the European and the global stage, and thanked her for guiding the growth of the India-Germany strategic partnership. The two leaders discussed key issues of mutual importance, including the response to COVID-19 pandemic, bilateral ties, regional and global issues, particularly the India-European Union relations. Prime Minister Modi briefed Chancellor Merkel on the developments in India with regard to vaccine development and assured Chancellor Merkel of India's commitment to deploy its capacities for the benefit of the world. He conveyed his best wishes for early containment of the new wave of infections in Germany and other European countries. Prime Minister Modi welcomed Germany's decision to join the International Solar Alliance and expressed his desire to further strengthen cooperation with Germany under the platform of Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Noting that this year marks the 70th anniversary of setting up of the bilateral relations between India and Germany and 20th anniversary of the strategic partnership, the two leaders agreed to hold the 6th intergovernmental consultations at an early date this year and to set an ambitious agenda for the same.
And in other news, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is on a visit to Colombo, as we've been telling our viewers over the past few days. It's his first overseas visit this year. Besides reviewing anti-terror cooperation, maritime security, trade and investment, India and Sri Lanka also discussed post-COVID cooperation. On Wednesday, the External Affairs Minister met Sri Lankan Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa during his 3-day visit to the country and discussed ways to strengthen bilateral cooperation on various issues. That's his Twitter message on the occasion. Following up on the progress made since virtual summit with PM Narendra Modi. And we now go back once again to our top story about about what's happening in the U.S. Capitol after riots broke out yesterday as Trump supporters surged Capitol Hill and there was
counting
police
there of
action
the Electoral College
also.
votes taking place.
Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Portman, Mr. Reed, Mr. Risch, Mr. Romney, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders.
The counting of the Electoral College votes, they are taking
Mr.
place
Sass.
after the U.S. lawmakers returned to the Capitol.
Mr.
They're
Schatz.
continuing the counting. This was hours after a mob of rioters there
Schumer.
overran the building and sent members of the Congress fleeing.
Mr. Scott
But the
of
situation
Florida.
was then brought under control by the National Guard troops
Mr.
who
Scott of
dispersed the
South
crowds there.
Carolina.
Remember, early this morning, India time, of course, there was
Shaheen.
scenes witnessed there as far as chaos had erupted inside the
Shelby.
Capitol building as thousands of pro-Trump demonstrators had charged the complex
Ms.
and
Cinema.
eventually made their way onto the Senate floor. But for now, the
Ms.
situation has been brought under control and the counting there
Ms.
of the
Stabenow.
Electoral College votes taking place at the
Mr.
Capitol.
Sullivan,
Names being sounded out, live visuals there
Mr. Tester.
from the seat of the U.S.
Mr. Thune.
voting in the U.S. Senate. And
Mr. Tillis,
as the elections have stretched a few days into 2021,
Toomey.
but it appears that the general election cycle
Mr. Tuberville.
of 2020 is finally drawing to
Mr.
a
Van
close.
Hollen, Mr. Warner, Ms. Warren, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young,
And you're getting those live visuals there from the US Senate as voting is underway for the Electoral College votes. And even as there was high drama just a few hours back, and pro-Trump protesters had surged through the halls of Congress, forcing both chambers to suspend deliberations. It's clear now that with the conclusion, which has yet to be announced, of course, but media outlets have made it clear that the Democrats have won the Georgia runoff elections, 2 runoffs there, and although the general elections 2020 cycle has finally drawn to a close and Joe Biden all set to take over from President Donald Trump. Also, with the Georgia results, the political playing field for the beginning of Joe Biden's presidency appears to be set in his favor. And questions have been raised by the Trump camp. However, these 2 victories seem to have put any doubts about the victories that Joe Biden had won, President-elect Joe Biden had won, to rest. There are no doubts that the Georgia win is authentic, and it's good news for Biden's rather extensive legislative agenda on issues like healthcare, the environment, government reform and the economy, which should be able to survive the House and at least get an up or down vote in the Senate. For 2 years, the Republican-controlled Senate had bottled up virtually every piece of legislation coming out of the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. As such, the Georgia poll results would make all the difference and remove all the blockages to the Democrat agenda. And many analysts see the Biden presidency off on the right foot with very likely another round of coronavirus relief, including larger per-person relief payments to all Americans. That's what analysts are saying. Right now, we're bringing you live visuals of the voting that is currently underway in the U.S. Senate. Electoral college votes are being counted. The final stages being put in place before President-elect Joe Biden takes oath. Already the selection process for his cabinet and other members of his team underway.
Absolutely. The U.S. lawmakers there at the Capitol continuing the counting of the electoral college votes. This happened hours after a mob of rioters had overrun the building and sent the members of the Congress fleeing. But soon after that, high drama was witnessed there at the Capitol. The situation was brought under control by the National Guard troops, who then had to disperse the crowds using tear gas. And this is the live visuals that we're getting you from Washington, D.C. after chaos had erupted early this morning India time. And this is the counting of the electoral college votes there taking place. In fact, remember, the president there had fomented thousands of supporters in a speech by the White House before they marched to the Capitol and vowing to never concede these elections. But the situation there was brought under control soon off. And talking about, the Georgia's results there, the Democratic challengers, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, have defeated Georgia's 2 incumbent Republican U.S. senators in the state's runoff elections in a development that gives their party effective control of the Senate. Remember, Republicans had controlled 50 seats in the Senate following November's elections and would have remained the majority party in the 100-seat chamber with just 1 win in Georgia. But instead, Democrats picked up the 2 seats and now are set to run the Senate as a Democratic. Vice President Kamala Harris will now be casting the tie-breaking votes.
And currently, we're bringing you live visuals there from the Senate as the Senate votes as the electoral. It's the counting of electoral college votes that is underway now. Meanwhile, reactions are pouring into all the recent events that took place in Congress, outside Congress, as Trump supporters stormed the Congress and forcing many representatives to flee. Others were taken out under police cover, and it was only after police action that the riots could be brought under control. Vice President Mike Pence to reacting and telling that these are not protests and this is not the way to protest.
Absolutely. He also termed the incident as a dark day in the history of the US Capitol. We'll keep getting you all the updates and the developments from there. But moving on now to some other news. While India has welcomed the evolution and the rise of Africa as a key factor in the contemporary world and is committed to supporting the African countries as per African priorities and without conditionality, says the Indian Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla at the UNSC over the open debate on the challenges of maintaining peace and security in the fragile context. Now, highlighting the long-standing bond between India and Africa, the Foreign Secretary has said that a shared colonial past and the common developmental challenges have shaped relationship between the both. He also said that India and its African partners have worked together for a fairer global governance system, including a more equitable global economic order. He also added that both India and Africa have worked together on a development agenda for the benefit of our peoples.
The bonds between India and Africa have been forged over several centuries. Long-standing trade and diaspora links across the Indian Ocean, a shared colonial past, and our common developmental challenges have shaped India-Africa relations. Under our development partnership with Africa, India has reached out to 43 African countries. We have executed 189 developmental projects in 37 African countries, and around 77 projects are under execution with a total outlay of $12.86 billion. India has supplied critical medicines to several African countries to help them fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We have also responded to the call of the Secretary General and upgraded our peacekeeping hospitals in the DRC and South Sudan during the peak of the pandemic.
The Foreign Secretary has expressed concern over the struggle of peacekeeping missions to implement the ambitious mandates. He emphasized on the sufficiently mandated and resourceful missions. He also added that the peacekeeping mission should have a clear and well thought out exit strategy.
We need to ensure that the UN and its presence on the ground, its peacekeeping operations and special political missions are sufficiently mandated and resourced to implement a comprehensive understanding of peace and security. Having contributed significantly to UN peacekeeping in Africa for 6 decades, we have seen how peacekeeping missions are struggling to implement ambitious mandates. Peacekeeping missions should have a clear and well thought out exit strategy.
Now, speaking on the challenges faced by Africa due to the growth of the menace of terror, he said that all national and multinational joint task force need more robust support from the Security Council and the international community.
Africa today is facing serious challenges posed by the growth of terrorism, particularly in the Sahel and Horn of Africa. In this regard, initiatives such as AMISOM, G5 Sahel Joint Force, and Multinational Joint Task Force need more robust support from the Security Council and the international community. The Council needs to introspect that while more than half of the country issues on the Council's agenda pertain to Africa, the African continent does not have even a single voice amongst the permanent membership to defend its own interests. We need to correct this historical anomaly and collectively support the Ezulwini consensus.
Well, the process of counting of the US Electoral College votes and all the drama that it entails, has entailed, everything that has happened, dominating the news for today, likely to dominate for some time, even as President-elect Joe Biden, the stage is being set for his taking over from President Donald Trump.
Yes, absolutely, and we'll get you all the updates on that. But for now, it's time to get a look at all the business developments of the day today in the Business Buzz.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman yesterday reviewed the progress of the National Infrastructure Pipeline NIP implementation in New Delhi. The agenda of the meeting was to discuss the progress of NIP projects, expenditure incurred so far, and the initiatives taken to expedite the project's implementation. This was the second review meeting by the Finance Minister with various ministries and departments to monitor and accelerate NIP project implementation. Despite the COVID pandemic, NIP has managed to achieve substantial progress. The NIP was launched with 6,835 projects, which is now expanded to more than 7,300 projects.
And after that, a look at all the developments taking place around the world in a segment across the globe.
And as we were telling you, across the globe, there's news of the third lockdown. Lockdowns in other countries as well. Also, well, all the COVID updates, the COVID situation not as good in India, not as good in the West as it is in India.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at all those developments. And an update now on COVID-19 from across the world. Well, as of now, more than 8 crore 67 lakh COVID-19 cases have been reported worldwide, with over 18 lakh 88,000 deaths. Over 6 crore 30 lakh people have recovered from the virus. The US still continues to remain the worst hit country by the pandemic so far and has crossed the 2 crore mark. The US has reported over 2 crore 18 lakh cases of the virus, with the death toll surging past 3 lakh 69,000. Now, Brazil follows the US in terms of their death toll with 1 lakh 99,000 deaths.
And UK lawmakers have approved tougher lockdown measures in view of soaring cases of the new rapidly spreading variant of COVID-19. The Parliament has overwhelmingly backed the latest lockdown with 524 to 16 in its favour. UK PM Boris Johnson has been criticised for being too slow to introduce strict regulations in the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic, and he was not expected to face a large rebellion from his Conservative Party in the vote. Britain has been among Europe's worst hit countries by COVID-19, reporting a caseload touching another high. The country's COVID-19 cases stand above 28 lakhs, while more than 77,000 lives have been lost in the country due to the virus.
Now, China has imposed a lockdown in its northern city of Zhejiang after Hebei province on Wednesday reported 63 COVID-19 infections, the mainland's highest daily number for months. The whole of Zhejiang was placed under lockdown measures, with passenger train services suspended to prevent further spread of the virus. Flights and coach services to Beijing have also been cancelled. The 63 infections prompted a top Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention official to warn that the tally might rise further in the coming days.
And we're all the news from sports in our next segment. Rain stopped play in the first session of the third test of the 4-match series between India and Australia at the Sydney Cricket Ground today. Australia were 21 for 1 in 7.1 overs when play was interrupted. As it is still raining there, the scheduled close of plays has been extended till 1 p.m. with an additional 30 minutes of permitted extra time allowed to ensure minimum overs are bowled. Earlier, the visitors picked an early wicket, with Mohammad Siraj registering the dismissal of opener David Warner. The two teams come into this fixture with the series tied 1-1. The visitors welcome back Rohit Sharma. Meanwhile, Navdeep Saini has made his debut in the longest format. Currently, the lunch break is underway.
Meanwhile, Australia's Claire Polosak became the first female match official in a men's test match when she took up the fourth umpire's role in the third test between India and Australia. The 32-year-old from New South Wales has already earned the distinction of being the first woman on-field umpire in a men's ODI match in ICC's second division league between Namibia and Oman, played at the Windhoek in 2019.
And as always, it's time now for our health tip of the day, in which our correspondent and colleague Kiran Bharadwaj speaks with an expert to tell you more so that your lives can be all that better and healthier. If you eat foods low in fiber, they take longer to digest, lead to irregular bowel movements, and can also cause stomach pain. In this report, we'll tell you more about the importance of fiber for digestion and health. Take a look.
Fiber is a necessary component of a healthy diet. Fiber plays a major role in digestive health. Taking fiber in diet have manifold benefits for our health.
Fibers are plant-based carbohydrates that are not digested in our intestine. They absorb water and make the stools softer and bulkier, thus facilitating easy passage of stools. So apart from preventing constipation, they also help in lowering of cholesterol and protect us against diseases like cardiovascular diseases, diabetes and various colorectal cancers.
Eating fiber-rich foods help move the contents of the large intestine along more quickly. Fiber also absorbs water, softening stools so that they pass more easily. Fiber is important to digestion and regularly it should be taken for weight management and other health benefits.
The dietary sources of fibers are whole grain cereals, pulses, vegetables, fruits, nuts. The parents should make sure that children are consuming around 15 to 30 grams of fibers in a day.
Switch to whole grains. Choose a high fiber breakfast diet. Fiber is important for keeping the gut healthy.
If you have constipation, problem with digestion, or you want to lose weight, the solution for you is dietary fiber consumption. Eat lot of fruits, vegetables and take roughage in your diet. This will help to prevent many non-communicable diseases and keep you healthy. Kiran Bhardwaj, DD News.
And with that, let's now move on, take a look at the significance of this day in history.
On this day in 1610, the astronomer Galileo Galilei sighted 4 of Jupiter's moons. Galileo discovered the first 3 Jupiter satellites, Io, Europa and Ganymede. He discovered mountains and valleys on the moon, that Jupiter has a moon of its own and that the sun has spots which change. Galileo discovered multiple moons around Jupiter. This day in the year 1785, Frenchmen Jean-Pierre Blanchard and American John Jeffreys travelled from Dover in England to Calais in France in a gas balloon, becoming the first to cross the English Channel by air. On this day in 1789, America's first presidential election was held. Voters cast ballots to choose state electors. Only white men who owned property were allowed to vote. As expected, George Washington won the election and was sworn into office on 30th April 1789. This day in the year 1967, Sahibzade Irfan Ali Khan, known professionally as Irfan Khan, was born. He was an Indian actor who worked in Hindi cinema as well as British and American films. On this day in 1980, the people of India voted Indira Gandhi back to power, less than 3 years after rejecting her emergency dictatorship. This day in the year 1987, India's first World Cup winning captain and legendary cricketer Kapil Dev took his 300th Test wicket against Sri Lanka in Cuttack Test.
And it's time now for our next section, Web News Review, in which we'll be told about whatever is the news that's trending on Twitter and on social media.
And we have our colleague Vishal Barriston joining us for the web review. Vishal, good morning. What do you have for our viewers this morning from the World Wide Web?
Well, a very good morning to you, Nancy and Rukma. It's been a very cold and chilly morning, and let's see what the newspapers have to say, starting off with the Indian Express, and it writes about the memoirs of the former President Pranab Mukherjee, and it reads, Modi achieved prime ministership, Pranab wrote in his memoir. And in this memoir, Pranab writes about his cordial relationships with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and how he would discuss his foreign trips before embarking on a foreign trip, and he would send notes about the country and the relationships with the country, detailing the core points with that country. So this is the Indian Express news. And now moving on to Hindustan Times, and it talks about the vaccine, and we are all very much concerned about that issue. Rollout countdown, more vaccine storage points, dry runs, extra training. It talks about vaccine dry runs and at least one vaccination center in every district of the country, setting up of extra vaccine stores in remote terrains like Ladakh. So this is an important news for all of us. The third story is from the Indian Express again, and it talks about the Supreme Court fixing notional income for homemaker, step towards social equality, dignity. Now this is an important ruling, and the Supreme Court pointed out that according to the 2011 census, nearly 159.85 million women stated that they are engaged in household work, and that was their main occupation. So quite an interesting observation by the Apex Court. Now moving on to our next news, that is from the Times of India, and it talks about India's commitment to the African continent, and it reads, "Will support Africa without conditionalities, India at the UNSC." Now let us remember that several African countries, they have acquired conditional loans from China, and they have fallen into trap of China, and India says that it was committed to support Africa without any conditions. So India clearly reaching out to the African countries.
Okay.
And our last
all right, Vishal, thanks very much for joining us for this morning and sharing all that's been making it to the World Wide Web. Let's move on now to our next segment and take a look at the weather conditions for today.
Well, the western disturbance as a cyclonic circulation over North Pakistan and neighborhood persists, and now seen about between 1.5 kilometers and 4.5